So this is a quick animation that I threw together yesterday in my spare time. It's super rough. I didn't even shoot reference for this, so I apologize for any jankiness in it. But we've got a character here that's crying. And this was all done in the viewport. Now, again, this is super rough. The tear is just super simple. But as you look at this, there's a lot of little things going on in here that help to make the character feel like they're actually crying. The four main things are the eyes get shinier. We actually have tears on the lower lid. There's a tear that goes down the cheek. And when that tear goes down the cheek, it's actually leaving a wet trail behind it, so that we can feel that it's actually wet and it's interacting with their face. It's not just an object crawling on their face. See, my favorite movies make me cry. Yes, when a movie can make you cry or bring you the tears, it's such a good, horrible moment. It's so good. So we want to be able to sell that emotion. And if you're in a studio, you're going to have a VFX team, a whole simulation team that's going to help with this to really sell everything. But if you're working on your demo reel, you still want to sell that emotion, but you don't want to have to spend a month trying to learn how to just make one tear simulated roll down the cheek and then render it and have it leave a wet trail. That's going to take forever. So we want just simple little tools in here that will help to sell this. So let's just go over those four main things. And then if you want, I can show you how to do the lip quiver as well. I've got the lip quiver, and if you look closely, there's an eye shake in there as well. So we're going to be going over first the eye shine, how to make the eye feel like it gets wetter. Because when we start crying, it's not just tears that show up kind of lower down here. The whole eyeball gets wetter because as we blink, because we've got tears in our eyelids, in our tear ducts, it's getting the whole eye wet and it makes it look shinier. So we need to do that. The second thing is going to be actually getting the tears to be on that lower lid. And you can exaggerate this as much as you want. You could have the eyes like half filled with tears, just go full like Ghibli tears. Or you can keep it very subtle. But we want that nice layer in there, and we need it to follow the eyelid. So as you'll see here, as the character has eye darts and moves around, that tear sits there on the bottom. Then if we want the character to actually cry, and this is just a simple tear, we want that tear to be able to roll down that face and stick to the face, stick to the geometry of the face. And then lastly, if we really want to go full out, we can make that wet trail behind it. So that's going to be the goal for today. I want to show all of those different things. And it's essentially we're going from the easiest to the most difficult. So let's just jump right in. And at any time, if anyone has questions on this, definitely let me know. So let me open up the work file here. So this is a version of the file that has the animation in place. There we go. And that's it. We've only got the animation. We don't have the actual tears or crying or anything like that. So before we actually get into the demo, one thing I did want to point out, I already finished the animation pretty much in place here, but I did polish this. We talked about polish in previous classes. So if you actually look at the face controls here, you'll notice that I added a lot of interaction between all the controls. So if, for example, you look at, let me just scrub through here, the mouth, how the cheek here interacts with the mouth, gets pulled, the nose widens right there. We feel the cheek change in here. This is all stuff that we've talked about on the channel. Is essentially I animated the mouth first, and I just copied the animation from the mouth controls and the jaw control onto the different cheek controls. So for example, as his mouth goes down here, you can feel the cheek here kind of sinking in as he stretches his jaw. And then as it comes back up, we feel that stretch in there. Same thing with the eyes. As he blinks, all of the skin around the eyes is getting pulled and affected by that blink. So we don't have independent controls here just doing their own thing. Everything is tied in. Even the ear has a little animation right there. I probably over animated the ear for this animation, but it's in there. And we can kind of see this if I turn on wireframe on shaded here. You can see how the whole face is moving. So I just wanted to point that out for anyone who wants to really get into polish. It's not that you have to animate all of these controls manually and try to put everything in a long, super hard process. It's really just knowing what you can copy and paste. And at some point I do want to do a stream on that and go fully into this, but I did want to point it out here. I also made sure to animate the mouth in perspective here. So you can see it actually goes out and then in an arc here. So never forget that your lips go in and out. That's a very important thing. It's going to help. Even though we don't really see it, we feel it. Okay, so enough sidetracking. Let's get back to the tears. So number one, we want the eyes to be shiny. This is actually super simple. So what I'm going to do here is, as the character blinks, I want his eyes to be shinier when they open up than when they were before. Now you could do this without a blink, but I'm just going to hide the transition in a blink. So the way I'm going to do this is simply open up the hypershade. This shows you all the materials for your shot, and I'm going to find the material for the eye. So that's this one right here. And let me actually just get rid of all my keys here, just so we can start fresh. There we go. And then I just need to make sure to turn up the transparency. There we go. So this is basically like a fresh scene right here. There we go. So you need to find the material for the lens of the eye. Every rig is different. Some might not have this. You might have to just change the actual eye material. But in this case, this rig has a lens over top of the eye. You can see once again, if I bring up that transparency, it's just kind of a sphere that goes over top of the eyeball, which is essentially what we have. It's the lens of the eye. And with this material, I can actually animate it. All the attributes on any material can be animated. So for example, if I want to animate the color here, I can just set a key right there, right click, set key. And then I'm just going to go here and let's go white. Now we have the eyes going from black to white right there. So with this material, all I need to do is animate the shininess of it. Now for this type of thing, I typically prefer blends. So you have typically two types of shiny material. You have a blend and a fong. Fongs are okay for this, but the controls that you have are not as precise on getting that watery feeling to the eye. So if you do have the eye material and it's not a blend, you could try switching it over to one. But here we have our blend. So I'm just going to go to when the eyes are closed here, set a key on everything. So you can see all my attributes get keyed. And I'm just going to have it switch. So right here, when the eyes are open, I'm going to actually animate it here where I can see the eyes. I just want to bump up my eccentricity and my specular roll off. These two attributes, eccentricity is going to be how wide the shine is. So I'm just going to widen that a little bit. And the specular roll off is going to be essentially how shiny it is. So I'm just going to bump that up a little bit right here. And actually maybe pull down the eccentricity just a little bit. It's kind of just play around with them, see what feels good. So something around there. That feels pretty good. Now if we compare, you have this moment to this moment. And you can see the eyes are much shinier. There we go. Now I can just take this key right here. I'll just move it back to when the eyes are closed. So we won't even see that switch happen. Boop. Shiny eyes. There we go. So that's basically the first one. You just need to animate the shininess of the eye in the material itself. And we could push this even more so that when his eye is open here, maybe it's like barely shining at all. Just a little something like this. So we just have that bigger contrast till he opens his eye here. There we go. Done. So that's pretty much it. We've already got a much sadder character because we feel that reaction to the tears. We don't even have to add tears, but we're going to feel it. We're going to feel that this character is much sadder already. Okay. So, next thing. Next thing is we need to add the tears sitting on the lower lid. This might seem like it's going to be more complex, but it's actually not that hard. It really just depends on how far you want to go with it. So, to do this, I'm just going to go to a frame here where his eyes are open. I want to go to a frame where his eyes are open the absolute most, just because it's going to give me more control over it. So right here, I'm going to go to create, and I'm just going to create a polygon sphere. And I'm just going to take this sphere, and I'm going to move it to his eye. So the quick way to do this is I hit W to activate my move tool. I'm going to hold down V, which is point snapping, and then middle mouse drag right here on the eyelid, and it'll just snap that sphere right to that eye. Now with this in place, I can just take this sphere. I'm just going to shape it roughly. You don't have to be super precise with this. And just scale it down, and I'm going to place it on his lower lid here. So something like this. Let's make it a little smaller. Like so. And then with this now in place, I just need to shape it. So I'm going to select the vertices on this, and I'm going to use smooth selection, or soft selection, I should say. So to do this, you just hit the B key on your keyboard, and this will soften your selection. So normally if I select these vertices and move them, you'll see that they just move on their own. By hitting the B key, now they affect the controls around them. And I can adjust this connection here by holding down the B key and middle mouse dragging. And you'll see that it affects the radius, how much it's affecting the objects around it. And with this, I can now just move this and rotate this into place here. I'm just going to stick it into the corner of his eye. Right here. Now, the shaping, again, you don't have to try and be super precise about this. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of getting it to look good. So, round this out right here. Set that in there. Let's make this end a little thinner. And taper the center right through there. Maybe a little bit more. So something like that. And I'm just fitting it to the eye. Boop, boop. So something like this. You'll notice there's a few little jagged bits. Honestly, it doesn't really matter too much. I can spend a little bit of time and smooth it out. Now I'm trying to do this quickly here. You do want to spend a little bit of time to make sure it's not totally weird. And let's actually bring this back in just a little bit so it's not sticking out too far. So something like this. So we now have this in place. I can hit 3 to soften that up. And right now, you'll notice that in our shot, let's actually zoom in a little bit, it's just sitting on that eyelid. Now again, this depends on what style you want. If you want those Ghibli tears, you could make this huge. You could just have this really take up half the eye, and that would be okay. It's whatever style you want to go with on this. Let's actually make this a little bit bigger here. So something like this. This is pretty good. Maybe we're going to push this down just a little bit more. Okay, so we've got that tier. Is it perfect? No, but take some time to refine it. But at this moment, there's kind of two things wrong with this. One is it doesn't really look like a tier. Second thing is it's not going to follow the head. You can see here, it just stays behind. And technically, third thing, we're missing the tier on the other eye. So let's actually fix the second tier first. So I'm going to call this tier, and then this is the left eye. So tier left. I'm going to go to modify, freeze transformations. That way I don't have any weird scales or transforms in there. And I'm also going to delete the history just to be sure that I don't have any extra information that I don't need. And I'm going to take this and I'm just going to duplicate it. So now we have another one. And I need to flip it onto the other side. So I'm just going to take my scale X, set that to -1. And now I can just move that tier into place. Right in here. And you can shape it once again. I'm just going to keep it simple and just like this for now. At this point, I'm sure you all know the shaping tools. So once again, modify, freeze transformation. There we go. We've got both sets of tiers right in there. Then with this, I'm just going to take both of these and I want to attach them to the lower lid so that they follow along. Now to do this, I'm going to use a wrap deformer. The same way that you would attach clothing to a character, I'm going to attach these tiers to the lower lid. So to do this, I need to make sure that the body is selectable. Right there. I'm going to select the tier, then the body. I'm going to go to deform, wrap deformer. And if you want to improve the speed of the deformer, just make sure that exclusive bind is turned on. It tends to improve the speed that Maya works with a little bit. So I'm just going to hit create here and then do the same thing again. Tier, body, constrain, deform, and then wrap deformer right there. Now, with this, the tier will follow that lower lid right there. Now, the thicker you get it, the more you're going to get weird deformation. So typically this works better with like a thin line of tiers. We're not going to want to move the eyelid too much right here, or else you'll see right there, it's starting to deform quite a bit. But it follows the body now. So we get this. Okay. Now we just need to make these feel like tiers. So to do this, I'm just going to take both of these and I'm going to apply a new material to them. I'm going to right click, assign new material, or I'm going to assign a favorite material. And let's do this where everyone can see. Favorite material. I'm going to assign a blend once again. Now with this blend, the big thing I'm going to do is turn down the transparency, or turn up the transparency, I should say. So you get that kind of see-through effect right there. I can change the color a little bit so it's not just gray, but maybe we've got a little bit of blue in there. A pale blue, almost white. And maybe a little bit more transparency. And then I can just once again play with the eccentricity and specular roll-off to get that nice shine in the the water there. So something like that. Now, we've got tears in the eyes. And if I feel like they should be a little bit more pronounced, I can tone down the transparency and we'll just see it a little bit more clearly. There we go. Now, at this point, I can just take both of these and animate their visibility. So, as the eye closes, I don't want the tears to kind of get in the way. But then as the eye opens, I want the tears to be visible. So I'm just going to take the visibility here, key that right there. And when the eyes are closed here, I'm going to have that off. And then as the eyes start to open here, I'm just going to turn that on right there. Now it's going to happen over one frame, but we should get that nice kind of tears just coming in right there. You could even animate the transparency so it kind of fades in, or you could even just move them into place if you wanted to so they can kind of pop up. I like the visibility because it's nice and simple, and from a distance, it's just going to feel like the tears show up right there. So with that, we've got the tears in the eyes. So there you go, a little bit more complex, but still not too bad. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something that's a little bit more complex. Now, before that, I saw some questions, so I'll answer those first. An eye caterpillar, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Let's see. Hey, Tapioca, hey, I'm glad you found the stream. If you ever have any animation questions or Maya questions, definitely let me know. And I should save this here. Okay. Just out of curiosity, are you willing to give a glimpse of what your lighting setup for this is? Yeah, I can definitely do that. I'll do that after the demo and we can dive into the lighting here. So. Okay, and are you going to put this on the AM site or on YouTube? Yeah, so like everyone else was saying, if you go down to the videos, you can find recordings of all the previous streams. I post them on there. Eventually, one day when I have free time, I'm going to make a YouTube channel. I've been saying that for the last like 3 or 4 years. So it's whenever I have free time, which kind of sounds sad that I haven't had free time in 4 years, but one day it's going to happen. So we've got the tears here. Now, the next thing I want to do is add a tear rolling down the cheek. And there's 2 ways we can do this. There's the way where we're going to have a tear track along with it, or the standalone way. So I'm going to show the standalone way first, just in case you want to do this with anything else. Maybe you don't want a tear rolling down the cheek. Maybe you want something else happening along part of the body. And then we'll show the tear track method. So let's say I want a tear to roll down the cheek here. Essentially what I need to do is I need a curve to follow this face. And actually, no, let's actually do the tear track method and the other one combined, because it's actually going to be just a better setup anyway. And easier setup. So I'm going to merge them together. Doing this live. So I need this tear to follow the face. I need that to morph with the face as well. So as the character does all of this, that it stays on the cheek, and as the cheek kind of sinks in and puffs out. So how do we do this? Well, first we need to make the trail. Where is it going to go? And there's a few different ways of doing that. My favorite way is using the quad draw tool in Maya. So I have the body selected here. It's still selectable. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up here to the magnet icons at the top. I'm going to click this one over here, this last one. And what this does is it takes the selected object, in this case the body, and turns that into a live object. A live object is essentially an object that you can draw over top of. It allows you to snap things to the object. Excuse me. Take a sip of water here. And this program is Maya, Autodesk Maya. So, with this, the object is now live. The skin is live. What this means is I can go to my modeling toolkit here, or you can go under your modeling menu set over here, and you can find the quad draw tool right there. Quad draw essentially is a tool that allows you to draw out polygons. And if you have a live object, it allows you to draw it over top of this object, of this character in this case. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw out the path that I want this tear to take. So it's probably going to come down here from the corner of the eye. So somewhere along there. And let's have it come down. I'm looking at it through the side view here, trying to see what the path is going to look like. I want it to be interesting from the camera view. I don't want it to just be a straight linear line. And let's have it kind of come down here to his jaw. So something like that. That feels pretty good. Maybe I'll curve it a little bit more. No, I want it to kind of feel more straight at the end as it gets momentum. Okay, so with this, I've got this path in here, but it's still pretty rough. You can see it doesn't quite follow the face perfectly. It's not detailed enough. So I'm just going to take this now and just start adding some detail. And this is the beauty about the quad draw tool, is I can just add all this detail and it's going to continue to snap along the surface. So it's just matching the surface more cleanly. Right there. So I can just add all of this extra detail right there. It's a little rough. I kind of want this a little smoother. So once again, with the quad draw tool, I can just hold down shift and I can relax it. And you'll notice that it's just smoothing everything out. Like so. Now the ends are a little over smooth, so I'll open that up a little bit right there. And right here. There you go. Maybe a little bit more detail in that eyelid because it is a very fine area right there. There we go. So we've got the tear trail, where the tear is going to go. With this, let's actually go back into object mode here. And you'll notice that it is flush with the skin. It is right there on the skin. That isn't exactly what I want. I want it to be just a little above the skin so we can actually see it. The easiest way to do this is to right click, select vertices right here. So I can select all the vertices, and I'm going to then set my manipulator mode to normal mode. So to do this, you can hold down Control, Shift, right click. You can also do this by double clicking the move tool and just going into here. But I like the shortcut method more. So Control Shift right click. I'm going to switch the axis and I'm going to switch this to normal mode right there. Now what this does is instead of moving the vertices that I have selected in a specific direction, up, down, left, right, or based on the angle of the object, it's going to move each vertice based on their normal angle. The normal is which direction is that vertice pointing from the surface. So if I pull this out here, you'll notice that they all kind of pull out along the surface. So I'm going to make sure I pull this out in the end direction, the normal direction. And you see, it all pulls outwards from the face. It's not scaling, it's just pulling away in that direction. So I can just pull this out and I want it just to be ever so slightly over top. Just a little bit. Far enough that we get that separation, but not so far that we see a gap. Now, does it project to the surface? Do you mean the quad draw tool? The quad draw tool is projecting onto the character because we have the live surface turned on here. Once I'm done with that, I can turn off that live surface. So again, that magnet icon right there. So we have that tear trail and it is now just slightly raised from the face and you can see it right there. Now, since we have this, let's actually get this to look like the tears. Make sure that it creates this nice trail along the face, because right now it's just like a tattoo. It's just gray. I want it to feel like wet skin, which just kind of darkens the skin behind it. So to do this, we'll jump back into the hypershade. And first off, I'm going to, let's actually close this for now. I'm going to apply a new material to this. Once again, I'm just going to apply a blend. So let's go to, I'm just going to right click, assign favorite material, blend, right here. And with this, we can see, there we go, we can change the color. And this, I want a slightly darker than skin tone. So to do this, I'm actually going to turn on the material here in my viewport, but without lighting. So you'll see this is what it looks like with lighting. This is flat shaded, so no lights. This is what I want to use because it's going to catch the skin tone much more accurately. I'm going to go to color, use my eyedropper tool, and just grab that skin tone right there. And I'll just try to match it pretty close so you can see it's almost invisible right there. And I can now just make it a little darker. And we have that tear trail right there. Just going down his face right there. But it's slightly shiny because it is water. So let's actually adjust the specular and eccentricity on here just to make it a little bit more watery, shiny right there. Something like that. So we've got the tear trail. Let's see, which steps do I want to take next? Well, let's get the tear in place first, because the tear is actually going to be pretty simple. We have the trail, the path that tear is going to take, but I want this to travel down the center of this trail. So I'm going to take what I've created here, and I'm going to add a cut right down the center. So I just select my object, hold down Shift, right click. Let's do that again. So select my object, hold down Shift, right click, and I'm going to use the multi-cut. I'm going to add a cut right down the center. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to get it right in there. 50%. Right there. And now before I do anything else, I need this trail to once again follow the face. You'll notice that if I move this character here, it doesn't follow along. So before we go any further, let's once again wrap this to the face. So select the object, select the face, deform, wrap deformer. Now that trail follows the face, and not only that, it deforms with the face. So if I select this here and make sure my manipulator is back to object mode, you'll notice that it follows the face perfectly. Haha! So with this, I can now take this trail and I'm going to select that middle edge right here. Beep. That selects the edge all the way through the center. And to select that, I just selected one edge and then double clicked on it. So we've got that whole edge here. I'm going to go to Modify, Convert, and I'm going to convert this from polygon edges to curve. So what this does is it takes all of these edges and converts them into an actual curve object right here. So you can see there's the curve. Now the cool thing about that curve, it's kind of hard to see here. Let's move it there. That curve is that it retains the information of the original object. What that means is it's its own separate curve, but as I move the cheek, you can see that it moves along with. It's got that history, that connection between those two. So it also follows the face. What this means is now I can just take this curve and use it as a motion path. So a motion path is essentially I'm going to take a new object. I'm going to just create a sphere. Keep it simple. You can shape this and sculpt it however you want. And I'm going to place this sphere right on the end here, right on that first point. And let's kind of get it into place right there. And what I can now do is take this curve. And it's kind of hard to select here, so this is where the outliner comes in handy. Oop, there's our curve and our sphere. Constrain, and I'm going to do motion paths attached to motion path. Now, this sphere slides along the face as we go. But you'll notice that it's kind of going backwards for one, and it's already got animation on it. We didn't do any animation yet. When you first create a motion path and attach something to it, it's automatically going to be attached so that it moves from the start of your scene, in my case frame 1, to the end of your scene, frame 80. We can see this here by going to the motion path attribute right here, and the U value, that's the direction along the path, is already animated. I'm just going to delete that. Oop, get rid of all the animation. Now I can animate this myself. Up and down this path. There we go. So with this, all we need to do is animate it going down. There's our tier. Now, this is not my favorite way of doing this, mostly because this object is now constrained to the path, which means that if I wanted the tier to maybe drop off of his chin and fall, I'm going to have to deal with different things. I also can't animate it. So maybe I feel like this sphere is like not sitting deep enough in the face, or maybe I want to sculpt it. I'm going to have some troubles with that. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to do. I'm going to have some limitations to myself. So if you want to go a little bit more detailed and kind of get more control, let's actually name these objects. So this is going to be tier. This is going to be tier curve. Curve. Always name your objects. Otherwise, this is going to be the tier. What's it going to be? Tier trail. There we go. So we've got all of our objects here. I'm going to create a locator now. Create locator. I'm going to place this right here in the center where the object here is. And actually I'm going to modify freeze transformation. So this is a default position right there. There we go. There's our locator right at the start of that path there. And I'm going to constrain the locator to that path. So once again, locator, tier curve. We're going to constrain motion paths attached to motion path right there. Same thing. Once again, delete the animation on the U value so that we can animate it ourselves. Right there. And we see this object going right down as we go. Now, why did we do this? Well, the main reason is now I can take this sphere and I can just parent it to the locator right there. I just placed it within the locator, and let's call this tier locator. And I get the exact same thing where I can now animate this motion path here, but I also have control over the actual geometry because I can push this in further and animate it. It is not constrained, it is not locked off. I could even switch this out with another piece of geometry so I could shape it into an actual tier shape and have that go down the face. So it just gives you more control by adding that extra little step right in there. So there we go. We've got our tier that can go down the face right here. Perfect. Now, with this, to finish this tier, right now we have kind of an issue, which is that this tear is going to be hard to animate. It's going to be a pain to have to refine this animation, because every time we want to adjust the animation, we have to come in here, then open up the motion path, and then adjust the U value right in there. Now, the problem with that is if I just middle mouse drag, so I've selected the U value and I'm going to middle mouse drag in the viewport, notice how it just snaps along. I don't have smooth animation. The U value is so sensitive that unless you're holding down Control to refine that motion, it's just not very interactive. And it's just a pain to always have to go in here to animate this tear. So, how can I make this easier to animate? Well, I can make a control. So I'm just going to go to Create, and I'm going to go to NURBS, Primitives, and I'm going to create a circle here. I'm going to create a circle. Let's just rotate this 90 degrees right there and move it right next to the head here. Now you'll notice the color doesn't really show up on this background. If you want to change the color of an object like this, you can just go to Attribute Editor, go to the Object Display, turn on the Drawing Overrides, enable them, and you want to change the color index right here. So I'm going to switch this. Let's just put it pink right there. There we go. Now this is going to be our tear control. And let's actually name this tear control. Now, I also want to make sure that this stays right where it is. So I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations right there. And I want an attribute here that I can use to control the tear itself. So to do this, with this control selected, I'm going to go to Modify, Add Attribute right here. Now let's call this tear position. So we've got tear position. And there's a whole bunch of things here. The big thing to keep in mind is that we want this to be a float. So float is essentially any value. It could be decimal points, it could be negative, it could be positive, whatever we want. Now, the other thing I want here is because there's a very definite beginning and end to this tear position, I'm going to set a minimum and maximum range for this. The reason for this is so I don't have a value that means nothing. If the tear has reached the end of its path, I don't need it to go further than the end of this path. It's not going to do anything. So I'm going to set this from 0 to 100. That's going to give us a pretty good range. I can always come in here and edit it if I feel like it's too little. So right here, there's our tear position. Let's hit OK. And here we go. We've got a new attribute, tear position. Right there. Haha. Now, I can use this, and we should save. I can use this, and I'm going to connect it to that U direction. That actual attribute right in here. The U value. So to do this, I'm just going to go to Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor, and I'm going to find my tear position right there. Let's select our locator right here, and I'm going to reload that to the right here. And you'll notice that I'm not seeing the motion path right here. I can't see where it is. That's because I've got the locator selected and not the actual input right here, the actual motion path. So to select the motion path, there's a few different ways you can do this. One of my favorites is, let's see if Maya does this now. Reload right? No, didn't do that. Actually, it did. Yay. So this is something in newer versions of Maya. In old versions, you had to dig through. If you just select the motion path right here, you'll notice that now it's loaded up right there. Yes. So you want to make sure to select that, then hit the reload button. And right here, we have the U value. Boop. Right there. So tear position into U value. They're just connected. Now, yay, we're done. Not necessarily. The big reason being that if we animate this, you'll notice that the value is still from 0, and then I go up here to 1, and it's all the way up. I've got this set so it can go all the way to 100, but it's not doing anything because the U value is just 0 to 1. So how can we adjust this? I want to have that precision. I want to be able to animate this tier super precisely. You don't have to. You could just keep it from 0 to 1 and just leave it at that. You don't have to go any further. This is just extra because I do love having that extra little bit of control on things. How can I make this more sensitive, essentially? Well, we can use a little bit of math. So with this control selected, I'm going to go to Window, and then I'm going to open up the node editor. The node editor basically shows you the connections between objects. And with this new tier control selected, I'm going to graph it out right there. So this shows us all the connections. And this is where naming comes in very important. So here's our tier control right there. And there's our motion path that we had connected to. And we can see that the tier position is connected into the U value right here. And it's 1 to 1. So the value of the tier position equals the value of the U value right there. I just want to make that more sensitive. I want to multiply that sensitivity. So I'm going to hit tab here and I'm going to add a multiply divide node. This is going to allow us to multiply a value or divide it. And essentially I'm going to take my tier position, put that into input 1x right here, and output that. So output x into the U value right there. So the way a multiply divide node works is that you put in your inputs, and the input 1 is going to be multiplied by the input 2 right here. So whatever goes into input 1 is going to be multiplied by input 2, or divided. Now, if we think about this, I want a value of 100 in my tier control to equal a value of 1 on my motion path. Again, the motion path is 0 to 1. So this means I'm going to have to divide that value by 100. Just a little bit of math. So let's open up our attribute editor. And for the multiply divide node, I'm going to switch this to divide. And once again, divide that by 100. This is extra. Again, you don't have to do this. If you want to keep it simple, just set your tier control to a max value of 0 and 1, and you're done. You don't have to go any further. This is just extra. So now, what this basically means is that if I have a position here of 100, it's going to divide that by 100, which is going to equal 1. This means that now I have this control and I have super precision. Look at that. How many little tiny tweaks I can do to that without having to deal with tiny little values. And now I can animate this from the top all the way to the bottom, nice and simple. So if we wanted to animate this right here, the character blinks, the tears come in. Let's actually put that tier back up to the top here. Key that. And by the end of the shot, I want it down at the bottom, right there. And let's have it take a little bit of time to get down the cheek here. So it just kind of holds a little bit more at the beginning before rolling down faster as his cheek becomes more vertical right there. So we've got that. I can go into the graph editor and kind of clean this up here a little bit. So something like that for now. And we've got our tier. There we go. Now it's right now just a gray sphere. So we can take that and add our tier material, which should be Blinn 5, I believe. Nope, that's our skin color. So once again, it's important to name things. So our tiers are Blinn 4. So we'll call this tier material M. So I can now take this, right click, assign existing material, and look for my tier M. Right there. So we now have that tier going down the cheek, and I can animate the visibility as well, just like what we did on the other part. So key that off here, on here. There we go. So now we have a character blinking, and we have that tear go down their cheek. There we go. All in there. So let's save. At this point, we only have one more thing to do. We need to be able to animate. We want to animate the tear trail actually growing as it goes down the face. Noelia, hello! Hope you're doing well. We want this tear trail to come down as the tear goes down. At this point, he's already had a tear go down his cheek. We don't want that. We want the tear to actually make the cheek wet as it goes down. How do we do that? Well, I actually did a demo on this not that long ago. What we want to do is just animate a texture moving across it. In this case, what we want is a ramp, which is a gradient, basically animating the transparency of the object as it goes down. So in order to do this, the first thing we need is UVs on this object. If we're going to add a texture on this, we need information to tell where the texture is going to line up on this object. And yes, I did add a wrap deformer for the eye caterpillar, the tears in the eyes as well. So all of it's pretty much attached using wrap deformers. So I'm going to select this here, and I'm going to go to my modeling menu set here, open up the UV editor, and you'll notice that right now the UVs don't really make much sense. They're just kind of flat. They're not doing anything. So let's just quickly apply some UVs here. I'm going to go to UV, and I just like to do a planar UV. This just creates a nice flat plane right there. Now with this in place, I can just stretch this up, and essentially what I want is for this UV to go from top to bottom, where I animate this texture, kind of this ramp, this gradient going from top to bottom, showing the transparency. Now, the way UVs work, for anyone who doesn't know, is your texture fits within the 0 to 1 space right here. So if I have a texture, it's going to go from the bottom line here, 0, all the way to the 1 line right here. Anything beyond that is just going to loop. So you'll notice you can see these quadrants right here. I don't know how well it's coming through. There's a quadrant here, here, here. That's just the loops in there. So we want that 0 to 1 space. Now, the way I'm going to have this fit here is I'm going to take my UV shell right here, and let's actually just take the UVs, and I'm going to start to realign them. So I'm going to open up my align and snap here, and let's see, actually, I always forget where this is in here. It is... There's a few different ways we can do it. Let's actually unfold. There we go. So straighten UVs. I want to straighten these in the U direction. So that's left and right. So let's do that right here. And you'll notice that all the UVs that were at a slant are now straight. This just kind of makes it easier to work with. I can also do it in the V direction right here. Boop. Now everything's been nice and straightened out. Now the key here is you want to get it mostly straight to begin with. Otherwise it's not going to snap correctly. So with this now, all I need to do is nice and straight, is go to layout. This is going to place this within that 0 to 1 space. And honestly, this is going to be all I need. Yeah, so let's actually keep it like this for now. So now you can see everything's nice and straight, and it goes from 0 to 1. The reason why I want it to be straight is so that the material, the ramp, actually flows in the direction of this texture and doesn't kind of go off at weird angles. So we've got that. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is essentially animate the transparency of this object. If we open this up here and let's find our material here. Again, you want to name these because it can be very tricky to find, and that's not the right one. This one here. So this is going to be our tear trail. And if ever you want it to be at the start, just put like an AA or something like that. Or just an A. You don't have to, but now alphabetically is always near the start. It just makes it easier to find if ever you need to do something like that. I very rarely do, but when you're dealing with hundreds of materials, it can be very nice to organize them in groups like that. So let's take a look here and close off some windows so we don't see everything. And we're going to graph out this object here. So here's our tear trail. We've got the color. This is the actual wetness kind of look to it. And then we have our transparency. This is going to control, well, the transparency, whether we can see it or not. And in this case, we don't want it to just be globally on or globally off. Maybe we do want that at some point. But what we actually want is it to turn on from top to bottom. So to do this, what I can do is take this transparency value and I'm just going to add a ramp to it. So I clicked on this checkerboard pattern here. And I'm going to add a ramp, a gradient. And now that's connected right in there. And you can see now we have this gradient that we can animate on and off. White is off, black is on in this case. So I just need to flip these so it goes the other way here, top to bottom. And right now it's a very soft gradient. You can see that it's just fading off. Let's zoom in here. You can see it's just fading off, which might be nice. But we want this to follow the tear. We don't want it to like trail behind the tear and slowly get wetter. No, it has to be wet when the tear hits. So the interpolation here is going to be, how does this tear, or how does this ramp, I should say, fade? Right now it's linear. So it's a linear gradient from one color to the next. If I take this and set it to none, it is a sharp cutoff right there. Now, as I animate this material here, that basically gets us what I want. Right there. Whew, all the way down. Okay. So we've got that right there. And we need to essentially just animate this. Now there's a few different ways we can do this. One thing we can do, because our tear is following exactly along that same path, we're using the same object, it's going from top to bottom, we could actually connect this directly into our other control, the tear position control. This is not something I'm a huge fan of typically because I like to have that extra control in case I need it, but I'm going to show it here just in case you want to do something like this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take our tear controller right here. Let's once again go to Window, General Editors, and I'm going to open up our connection editor right there. And we're going to once again connect our tear position. And this time I'm going to select my ramp material right here, or ramp texture, I should say. I'm going to reload that to the right. Now, this is where it's a little tricky depending on your ramp. the attribute we want is the selected position right here. That, you'll notice that when I move this color right there, that's the attribute that changes. So I needed selected position, but it's going to be under, where is it here? Color entry list. So your color entry list is all the different colors within this ramp. You'll notice that if I add another one, and I'll have to refresh here, reload right. Now we have a new color in there. So our color entry list is the colors that we have. Let's reload that again. Right there. Now, it can be hard to know which is which. Which is color entry list 0, color entry list 1. Honestly, you just kind of have to guess sometimes. So here it is. We want the selected position right there, position. So let's actually connect it to 1 and see what happens. Oop. Nope. That moved the white attribute right there. So let's turn that off. Let's connect it to color entry list 0. Oop. Now the black value moves right there. Perfect. And with this, if we select our control here and animate the tier position, let's make that just a little bit bigger here. Actually, let's close off our hypershade. We don't really need it right now. So tier position, you'll notice that this isn't working. Why isn't it working? Well, because once again, just like the U value, the position is a 0 to 1 space. It's going from just 0 to 1, and our attribute here goes from 0 to 100. So once again, we need to multiply that. So if I go into my node editor here, once again, let's graph this out. So here's our tier control. I'm going to graph that out. Our multiply divide node going into our motion path right here. And here's our ramp. And right into that color position right here. So all I need to do is take my tier position and export that same output here into my position instead. So we're dividing by 100, giving ourselves that extra, what's the word I'm looking for? Control over the tier position. Okay, let's see if this works. Now, if I animate this, you'll see it moves through our scene. And, boop, it comes down, like so. And we have that tier going through. Now, if we actually look at our shot right here, you'll see it goes down and goes along. Now you'll see how it kind of flips right here. And we get this like weird transition that's happening there. This can happen because of the transparencies. They're both slightly transparent, and it's kind of causing this weird like flicker. If you see this, there's a few different things you can do to try and fix this. One is to play with the tier. Let's see. Is this the one? Yeah. Your tier transparency. See if you can play around with that. If that doesn't work, you can take your trail here and play with the transparency on there. Now, the problem here is that we've already connected our transparency into place here. You can see the transparency is being controlled by this ramp right there. So how can we adjust this? Well, that white value here, this is the on transparency. If I tone this down, we can essentially make this trail, and let's see here. Yeah, so you'll see right here, the white is controlling where it's turned off. So if I put this pure white, it's off. That's what we want. But for the black color, it doesn't have to be black. Black is like pure off or pure on. If I tone this down a little bit, See how we kind of make that just a little bit more faded? And now we get less of that weird kind of pop in the tear going on. And I added an extra key in here. The tear is getting sucked back up into the eye at this point. If we look at the graph editor, you'll see it. And so many windows. Right there. Getting sucked back up into the eye. There we go. So as it goes down now, we get less of that sharp flicker. Now we just get that nice transparency in the tear there. There we go. So now we have our shot. And mostly it comes down to wrap deformers and just understanding the connection that different objects have. Now, once again, the simplest way of doing this is just adding that nice shine to the eyes. You don't really have to go much further than that. The tears on the eyelid, again, that's pretty simple. That'll get you 99% of the way there to really push that sadness in a shot. The tear itself is just extra. If you want to go that extra little bit and add the tear, you can do that. It is not necessary because, as you can see, it's quite a bit of work. It's a lot of knowing the ins and outs of Maya, but it can really be nice to push those or that effect in there. Now, could you add another color to offset the connection between the sphere and the trail? Yes. So if I wanted to have an offset here so that they're now 1-to-1 and I push that trail just a little bit further behind, there's a few different ways I could do that. I could create a new attribute in here, and this is the way I would normally do it because it gives you more control. I could take this and just create a tear trail position and animate two different controls. So now I have the tear, and then I can animate the trail separately. And this will give me full control, so I have exactly what I need. If I want to kind of keep it kind of automatic, and why is this not 0 here? Or 100, I should say. If I want to keep this more automatic so that it follows along, and I want this tear trail to be slightly behind the tear itself, I can open up the node editor, and essentially I want the value on the ramp to just be slightly behind. So for example, let's take a look here. When the tear is at, let's say, position 70 right here, so it's going down. 100 is when it's all the way up. 0 is when it's all the way down in this case. So if the tear is at position 70 right there, the tear trail might be at position 75 behind that. So I need to add, let's say, 5 units in there. To do this, I need to remember which attribute or which node it is here. So let me open up the hypershade and look through our list here. I always forget which utility node it is. It's not add subtract. It is a plus minus average. That's not what we want. We want a, wasn't float composite, was it? Yeah, float composite. So this is going to add or subtract values together. So let's take this float composite, and we're going to just add our value here. So this is, again, extra. I would just make another attribute normally, but let's kind of make it all automatic here. So I'm going to take value A here, I'm going to add, I think 1 or 2 is going to be fine right there. And then take our out float and put that into the position here. So now the tear trail is going to slightly lag behind the actual tear itself. So let's go further along here. And did I not connect that right? Put X. Oh wait, no. Yeah, I put that too soon. So, you have to make sure you're putting in the right spot. I need to take the tear position and then take that into the multiply. Otherwise, I'm taking a value that's been already multiplied by 100 or divided by 100 and shrunk down, and that's not going to work. There we go. So now, if we look at this here, let's zoom in. That tear trail is going to be slightly behind. If we adjust this, let's do 5. And make sure I'm taking this. Okay, yeah. See, this is where I'm not thinking correctly. Now we're going into here, subtracting, and then putting it out into both of these at the same time. I need a new multiply divide. I'm not thinking clearly here, because we need to have one value that is not offset. So this is already set up correctly. So I can just input 1x into here. It's going to divide by 100, because I just duplicated it. And I'm going to output that to the motion path here. There we go. Now the tear is just doing what it did before, and the trail is now being subtracted. So let's actually see how that works. If I hit 5 here, let's see if that does it anything. Ramp. Okay. Yeah, so you can see that trail is now behind the actual tear. So now I can just tighten up this number here until it follows just behind the tear itself. So right there, a value of around 5 is pretty good. Now, as it comes down, there we go. We're not going to get that tear trail interacting with the actual tear. And it's all automatic, one control. Now, again, I'm not a huge fan of that personally, because you're removing the ability to manually adjust things if you need to. For example, what happens if this tear shrinks down as it goes down his face? As it's coming down here, it starts off really big. Let's just set a key here on everything. But then by the end here, it shrinks down and we get just a smaller tear right on that face. Now we can see that gap right there, because we built in that gap based on the initial tear size over here. Now I have to go back through the nodes, and it's a pain. If I had 2 separate attributes, it would be just a matter of adjusting one, having that curve just change slightly over time. So it's really whichever one you prefer. And once again, this is going over the top with the complexity, but I just wanted to show what is possible and what kind of options you have when you want to do things like this. So there we go. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope it doesn't kind of scare you off from approaching something like this. Once again, the goal of this is just to make a character feel like they're actually crying or sad or have tears in their eyes. You don't actually have to animate the tear going down the cheek. That is extra. The 2 simple things you can do is just make the eyes slightly shinier and add that tear layer on the bottom of the eyelid, and you're going to be good. Those 2 things alone really help to make a character sad, like they're actually crying and not just kind of pouting. So I hope that helps, and I hope that makes sense. And if anyone has questions on any of this, definitely let me know. Now, let's see. There was a question on the lighting setup. So the lighting setup in this here is, let's turn on lights. Okay, they are should be visible. There we go. So I've got 3 lights. I've got a directional light right here. This is my key light right there. Or sorry, it's not a directional light. It's a cone, but with a very sharp angle right here. So it's just a very thin line. That's my key light, kind of lighting up the whole face here. I've got a fill light right there. So this is just filling in the shadows right here. And then I have a backlight behind them, a key or a rim light, which is just adding that nice like hue right there. Now, the way I created these lights, you can do this manually, but I used the Awesome Lights plugin. If you just do a Google search for Awesome Lights Maya, you're going to find this. And it's a really nice fast plugin because you can just go lights and it creates this quick setup for you. And then you can just adjust them to match your scene. So that's what I used here. Honestly, it's just a basic 3-point lighting setup. There's nothing fancy about it. You don't need the plugin. The plugin just makes it a little faster to create them. That's really it. Yeah, I've done this demo many times before. You just create 3 lights. And you can do directional lights. You can do spotlights. Spotlights give you a lot of control typically. Now, something else that I added in here was an Arnold sky dome light right here. And this is actually shrunk down. So normally when you have a sky dome light, you've got it kind of filling the scene here. I didn't want to see it all the time, so I just shrank it down. It doesn't actually affect the light really when you shrink it. So I just kind of place it down here by his feet. Now what this does is it adds the reflections to the eyes. If you see the eyes right here, if we turn this off, see how it gives that extra shine in there? And if I move this around, we just can't get that extra little life in there. And yes, Awesome Lights plugin. Here it is. Awesome Lights. So this just kind of gives that extra little depth in there. And just kind of also gives some warmth to the lights. If I increase the intensity of this here, because it's super low, you'll actually even start to see some reflections. So you can see the sky in his eye right there. And there's some buildings and whatnot. So it just kind of gives that extra little hint of detail. And of course, A to the J has the links. Perfect. So there we go. Now, again, you don't need the Awesome Lights plugin if you can't install plugins on your system for some reason, whether you're at a studio or whatnot. It's really just 3 lights positioned, one slightly 3/4 on the face here, one slightly 3/4 of the face here, one behind the character, super bright. And if you just do a search for 3-point lighting setup, you're going to find a lot of tutorials on how to set those up. So with this here, the other thing that I did is I added some shake to certain things. So if I go in here into my animation layers, I have an eye darts layer. This is going to add the eye darts to the scene. So you can see like right here, just a small eye dart right there. This just helps to add that extra life in there. And I turned this off just because I didn't want them to get in the way. I also added a shaker layer, which you can see adds that shake to the chin, to the lips, and to the eyes slightly. Now, the way you can do a shaker layer is you just take your object. So I'm going to turn this off here. Let's say I want to add a shake. Let's do the eyes. Just because the eyes, if we want that little like teary shake to them, we can do that pretty easily. I'm going to take my eye control here. Let's add a new animation layer, and we'll call this Shake 2. I already have my shake layer. And with this eye control selected, I'm going to select my Shake 2 layer, and I'm going to add in my Translate X and Y. That's going to be the left and right, up and down motion of my eye control. I'm going to right-click on those two attributes and hit Add to Selected Layers right here. So that adds those attributes into there. Now, there's a few different ways you can do this. By using the animation layer, basically what that's going to do is give us new copies of these attributes that we can now just animate on and make adjustments. So I can take these, set a key, and I can just do, let's say 5 frames right here. And this is going to be the manual way to do it. I can just add some kind of random shaking here. So something like that, let's say. And let's see how much that moves. Okay, that's pretty good. So something like that. And now I can just take this and I'm going to go to View, Infinity, and then Curves, Pre-Infinity, Cycle, Curves, Post-Infinity, Cycle. And now we get this nice motion right there. And let's just zero that out just so we have a nice loop right there. And now the eye control is shaking. Now it's kind of going diagonally left and right. So what I can do is just offset one of my curves now, like so. And now we get this kind of different pattern going through. If I really wanted to push it, I can now scale my curve here in time. And what this is going to do, normally you wouldn't want to do this because now I have partial frames, but what I've created is a curve where I'm not hitting the same keys every single time. So just to kind of as an example, if I look at this here and I go frame by frame or key by key, we're going from frame 1, there's our key. Frame 2, right on that same position. Frame 3, there, right on a key. There, there. Every time, and then I loop. Same position every single time. So it's always hitting those same keys. By scaling the curve, here we're just slightly to the right of that peak. Now we're almost at the top of the next peak. Now we're in the center. Now we're slightly further along that peak. Just before the peak, we missed that key entirely there. Every time it's cycling, it's not quite hitting that same position. So it creates a little bit of variance in there. So this is the kind of easy and quick way to make a shake that feels nice and natural and doesn't just feel like it's on a cycle, like it's repeating the exact same thing, because it's not. It's creating a variation as it's going through. And now if I feel like that's too small, I can just take my curves here, scale them up, and there we go. A little too much now. Oops. So we get that nice shake to the eye. Okay, now if I want to, I can now animate this layer. So I'm going to take my shake layer here. I'm going to set a key when the eye is closed, right there, where it's on. So the weight is on 1. And then a frame before when the eye is closed, I'll just turn this down and set a key. And we can see the weight animation right here. Now what that means, the weight of your layer is how strong this layer is. At 0, there's no shake. He closes his eyes, opens them up, and there's our shake. Right through there. And I could even animate this shake like slowly growing in intensity over time right here. Like this. So now as he opens his eyes, there's a little shake. And then as it goes through, it gets worse and worse and worse. So animation layers make something like this super easy. Nice and done. No problem. So I added that to the eye. Let's say I want to do the same thing for the lip. I'm going to do the jaw here, just nice and simple. So once again, for the jaw, I'm going to take my rotate X up and down right there. And I'm going to add that to my shake 2 layer. So I'm going to take my rotate X, right click, add to selected layers right here. Let's show the other way you can do this. So I can just take my animation here. I'm going to set a key at the beginning and at the end right there. So there's my animation for the rotate X. Now, using Animbot, so if you have the Animbot plugin, what you can do is use the, let me close this off here, right here, the SB, Simplify Bake Keys. And essentially, I'm going to bring this all the way up to 1. So this put a key on every single frame right through here. Through this whole section that I had this curve, which was the whole shot. So I have this whole thing on 1s now. And then I can use the noise wave. And there we go. We just get a nice randomized noise wave. Right here. So now, he's doing this. It's a little intense. So let's go to our highest peak here. Right there. And scale this down. We want this to be in there, but nice and subtle. And there we go. So this creates a different type of randomization. This is a little bit more truly randomized, but both ways, you're going to get the same effect. Because you feel it more than you see it, it's not really going to make a huge difference, whether you do it the manual way or with the Animbot method. But now we've got that little shake in that lower lid right there, or that jaw. I also added that to the lip. I also added it to the eye shine. So if I take this layer off and move this, and let's zoom in really close here. If you look at the shine of the eye, see how the shine of the eye also has a shake? This creates that feeling of like a wateriness to the eye, where the shine isn't perfect. It's almost like the water is trembling over the surface of the eye. And the way I did this was I simply added a shake element to my sky dome light here, very slightly, because you can see that affects the shake right here. Now you want to be very careful with this. The only reason I could get away with this here is because this light is barely affecting the scene. You're getting that little bit of shine, nothing else. If you were to add a shake like that to one of your key lights, like this one here, even if it's just a little shake, see how the light flickers on and off on the character? You're going to get an effect like that. So if you want to animate that shine, you either want to have a separate shine control. Some rigs have this where you can animate the actual shine of the eye. And I've done a demo on how to create your own for a rig. Or you have a secondary light like I have. So it's not my main lights. It's just this little light here that adds just a tiny little bit, and you animate that. That way you're not affecting the main lighting of the scene. You can see if I move this, we're not really feeling too much of a change to the lighting unless I make a big change in there. So this all just helps to add that extra little wateriness in there. And yeah, so that's pretty much all of it. I hope this helps. I hope it makes sense and kind of gives you ideas on how you can push your shot and get that extra little level of polish in there, especially with sadness. If a character just kind of pouts a little bit more and kind of frowns a little bit more, it doesn't usually feel like actual sadness. Mostly because it just feels like they're squinting a little bit more. Sadness and like the tears, that little bit of shine in the eyes and that little layer of tears on the lower lid, it goes a long way to really just impact that emotion and just like make us feel it. You really feel that the character they're affected by something physically. Their body is reacting to it versus just squinting a little bit more. it's kind of the equivalent of when you smile. If you don't really push the eyes into it, it doesn't really feel like they're actually smiling. So yeah, I hope that helps. And just to kind of show the end result here, this is what we ended up getting. So yeah, let's see. There was another question here that I missed, so let me make sure I get to that. There were a few questions. Is there such a thing as animation priority in Maya? So there's a hierarchy of what animation is performed first. There's a priority in the controls and the construction history of Maya. So in Maya, when you build something, things will happen in a certain order based on how they were created. So for example, in my tier trail here on the shot, because I created that wrap deformer first on the cheek trail here, and then I used that to create the curve that the tier itself follows, so this tier trail here, and then I created the curve. Because of that construction history, that curve will follow the first object. If I did it the other way, so I created the tier trail, created the curve, and then did the wrap deformer, the curve won't follow. So you need to kind of follow things in a specific order so that certain things are affected at certain times. In terms of animation, there's not really a priority because animation is just keyed curves. So there's not really this animation will be done before this animation in Maya. As animators, we do put a priority on which animations we want to do first so that we don't waste time and that we can save time when we're working. So, for example, the lip shakes, the eye shakes, stuff like that, that's final priority. That's going to be little things that aren't going to affect the shot very much. We do that last. Big priority is going to be getting the expressions in there, getting the body motions, the head turns, anything like that, so that we can build our expressions based on that. So in that sense, yes, there is a priority, but it's an animation priority, not a program priority, if that makes sense.